Now, setting it up. That's very good. Ooh, says it's done. Fantastic. No, wait a minute. Right, okie doke. Wonderful. Okay, now then, back to Zoom. Right. Okay, wonderful. All right, so it's you and me to begin with, and let's hope that everybody else joins in. So we're going to start off with our prayer, which is here. Okay, lovely. ריבונו עולמים ואדוני אדונים, אב רחמן וסליחות, מודים אנחנו לפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ולאבותינו, בקידה בהשתחוויה שקרבתנו לתורתך ולעבודתך עבודת הקודש, ונתת לנו חלק בסודות תורתך הקדושה, מה אנו ומחיינו, אשר עשית עמנו חסד גדול כזה. על כן אנחנו מפילים תחנוננו לפניך, שתמחול ותסלח לכל חטאותינו ועוונותינו, ועל יהיו עוונותינו מבדילים בינינו לביניך. וכן יהי רצון מלפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ולאבותינו, שתכונן את לבבינו לראתך לבדך. תקשיב אוזניך לדברינו אלה, ותפתח לבבינו הערל בסודות תורתך, ואל לימודנו זה נחת רוח, לפני כיסא כבודך כרך ניחוח. ותאציל עלינו, אור מקור נשמתנו בכל בחינתנו, שיתנוצצו ניצוצות עבדיך הקדושים, אשר אדם גלית לך אלה בעולם, וזכותם וזכות אבותם, וזכות תורתם ותמימותם וקדושתם, יעמוד לנו לבל נקשר בדברים אלו, ובזכותם תראיננו במה שאנו לומדים, כמו נעים זמירות ישראל, גל עיני והביט הנפלאות מתורתך, כי אדוני תן חוכמה מפיו דעת ותבונה, יהיו לו רצונים מפי, ויגון ליבי לפניך, אדוני צורי וגואלי. Amen. כן יהי רצון. Right, lovely. So what we're going to start off with is a kind of a discussion of what actually is Succot about. All right. So just before we start learning the text, I want to just talk a little bit about the actual nature of Succot. Okay, so we really need to actually see the three festivals, the festivals of Tishrei, as really one continuous Chag, okay, in which we deal with a particular aspect of our work. Now, we're at the beginning of the year, all right? So the year is the tikkun of the malchut, the tikkun of the soul, the tikkun of who we are in our consciousness, all right, throughout the year. It's the tikkun of the community of souls of Israel. That is what the malchut is. And what's the tikkun mean? It means that instead of using our inbred nature of our will to receive for ourselves alone, we learn to move those elements of our will to receive for ourselves alone into the framework of holiness in two ways. First of all, by refraining from using our wills to receive for ourselves alone, refraining from using our selfish love as a basis for our thoughts, actions and speech. And instead, we additionally want to try to use the aspect of giving unconditionally, okay, which is not actually natural for us in our normal frame of mind, but we have it within us because the soul within us has that as its actual reality, that it really wants to be able to give unconditionally because the soul brings it in, because those actions of giving unconditionally brings the soul back into affinity of form with the Creator from where we came. So this program, if you like, is being started up now in the month of Tishri, the first month of the cycle of the year, all right? And then following the month of Tishri, the festivals of Tishrei, this is the program that we're going to carry out in practice the rest of the year. So this month is actually different because it's the beginning. And so therefore, something special happens. And that is the beginning in which the light of God is shining, which is the beginning of everything. Everything comes from the fact of the light wanting to give unconditionally. Okay, so that gift of the great light of God comes into the world on Rosh Hashanah. And although on the one hand it's a tremendous gift to us, on the other hand it's also problematic in one sense. Because of our basic nature, which is our will to receive, we would tend to receive this great light, even this great light of God, for the sake of receiving. Because our will to receive for ourselves alone doesn't operate just in the physical dimension, okay? We want to receive things, okay? It also operates in the emotional dimension. We want to receive appreciation, we want to receive honor, we want to receive good feelings. It also operates in the mental dimension, in the desire for knowledge, the desire for progress, the desire of science, all that. And of course, it also does operate in the spiritual dimension, okay? And instead of wanting to connect with God for the sake of giving, we actually have the desire to receive the great light of God also for ourselves alone. And in fact, this is a very big will to receive for ourselves alone, the will to receive in spirituality. So on the one hand, we have this tremendous present of the great light of God coming into the world at the beginning of the month of Tishrei. But on the other hand, it can also cause problems. So we are given advice from the Torah, how to handle it, how to react, how to deal with it so that we don't receive it for ourselves alone. And we have different things to do, okay? We're told on Rosh Hashanah, we blow the shofar. And by blowing the shofar, we bring in the light of compassion, the light of Bina into the world. And we refrain from using our will to receive for ourselves alone. This is called driving out the Satan, okay? Satan just means the will to receive for ourselves alone. There's nothing outside us, it's only inside us. Okay? Then we have the 10 days of penitence, of course, with the Sechach. And then we go into Yom Kippur. And on Yom Kippur, we also have a different process in which we fast and do the other aspects of the afflictions that we do, the prayers, the confessions, okay, of Yom Kippur. All right. And then we come to the final one, which is Succot. All right. And Succot very much is a continuation of this process. And the process actually finishes on Hoshana Rabbah, okay, when traditionally the books are already sealed on Yom Kippur, but there's still the notes, okay, to be handed into the heavenly court. This is just the midrash, the story which explains the process. And on Hoshana Rabbah, this whole process of dealing with this great light comes to an end, except of course we then have Simchas Torah, in which we celebrate with God this incredible gift that he's given us, and with the joy of the Torah. Now, we can also look at this in the life of Yitzchak. In many ways, these three festivals are also the tikkun, the rectification of Yitzchak. Okay, now why Yitzchak? Abraham has the vessels of giving. So Abraham's vessels, Abraham's desires is chesed, and that's giving unconditionally. And giving unconditionally to God is called the tikkun of creation, the rectification of creation, because that brings us close to God. The vessels of Yitzchak were not the same as Abraham's. The vessels of Yitzchak were actually vessels of receiving. Very big vessels very big vessels, the vessels of receiving, okay? And he had to correct them for the sake of giving. The first thing that we hear about is the Akedah, all right? So he bound himself, he bound the vessels of receiving on the altar, all right? And this, of course, we remember and we focus on Rosh Hashanah when we blow the shofar, okay? Yom Kippur is also a tikkun of Yitzhak. It's interesting how Yom Kippur is also an essence of the end of the tikkun, okay? Because there's complete forgiveness. We have the new set of the Ten Commandments comes down into the world, and it has an essence of the end of the tikkun. And this is also hinted at in the life of Yitzhak. And it's in a rather subtle place, which I wouldn't have known about at all if it weren't for the Zohar in Toldot. And this is when Yitzhak is given the ability of giving the blessings, okay, to Yaakov. As we know, the blessings eventually go to Yaakov. Now, these blessings were not just, okay, I wish you have a good life and, you know, God should bless you with plenty good and plenty camels or something like that. That's not what the blessings were about. The blessings were about in which way would the end of the tikkun function. Would it be in the way of Esau, who would be receiving the maximum of light, okay, at the end of the tikkun? Or would it be going in the way of Yaakov, who wants to receive just as much as is necessary, the way of Yaakov, and to still continue his work of giving unconditionally? And as we know, the end of the story is that it goes to Yaakov. But as part of that preparation of Yaakov receiving the blessings from Yitzhak, Rivka says to Yaakov, go to the flocks and get me 2 goats, 2 kid goats to eat. So I will cook them for your father, and so then he will bless you. 2 kid goats for an elderly man? It doesn't make sense, okay? Even 1 goat is too much for an elderly man to eat. Why does he need 2 goats? Because Rivka knew in her Ruach HaKodesh, in her Holy Spirit that she had, in the spirit of prophecy that she had, that these 2 goats are for the 2 goats which we sacrifice on Yom Kippur. 1 is for God and 1 is for Azazel. And we see in the life of Yitzhak how he actually transformed the vessels of receiving, which were represented by the Se'ir Azazel, the he-goat for Azazel, is actually transformed by Yitzhak when he ate from these 2 goats. And so then we come to Yitzhak at Succot, okay, which is what we're going to be talking about today. And again, we get the clue from the Zohar. We know in the life of Yitzhak that one of the things that he did was he redug the wells, cleared out the wells that Abraham had dug and which the Philistines had all blocked up. Okay? Abraham had dug wells and the Philistines had blocked up. Okay, so they were all blocked up. What's a pit with no water in it? The water's not flowing. It's called a bore. Okay, like a pit, which is, like a one which they threw Joseph into, a dry pit. Okay, it's got no water in it. And what did Yitzhak do? He changed it into a be'er, or living fountain of water, living well of water, okay, which gives life force, all right? And what's the difference between a bore and a be'er? It's the letter Aleph, all right? So he brings something which is dead and lifeless and blocked up, and he brings the connection with God and gets the water flowing, okay? And this again we see the connection with, there's quite a strong connection with water on Succot. We have the Nisuch HaMayim, we have the Simchat Beit HaShoeva, and we see, therefore, that this image of Yitzchak opening something, transforming something which is barren into a life-giving a flow of the light of God. And this is the story of how Yitzchak is actually connected intimately with these three festivals, and in fact all of them are to do with the correction of the vessels of receiving. Now today we're going to look specifically at the issue of the Sukkah. There is, of course, in the Zohar, it talks about the Sukkah, it talks about Sukkah, it talks about the four species, okay? But today we're going to be looking at the Sukkah, all right? Now this is a lovely article of Rabbi Baruch Shalom Ashlag, okay, looking at what is the meaning of particularly the Sukkah, the Sechach on the Sukkah, okay, and what does it mean for our inner work? And remember the idea, we're going to take something which is barren, taking something which is separating us from God, and we're going to transform it into an incredible source of life. Okay, that's the inner meaning of Sukkot. And this is what he writes. Hag Sukkot matretz al kol ha'she'elot. Hag Sukkot gives us an answer for all our questions. Afilu hakashot biyoter vagruot biyoter. Even the hardest and even the worst. What questions are we talking about? We're not talking about intellectual questions. We're talking about the questions we feel about ourselves. Why is it I can't serve God? Why is it I feel so bad? Why is it I feel so disappointed with myself? Why is it that I feel that this work is for anybody else and not for me? Why is it that I find it so hard to have any connection with the Torah or with the service of God? These are the questions that each one of us has within us, okay, in different forms. Okay, I'm not saying everybody's got precisely the same question, that's not true, all right, but all of us have those questions, all right, in different ways, okay, if we're honest. All right, if we're honest about it, if we're not trying to whitewash, but we're honest about ourselves, we know that each one of us finds the service of God difficult in different ways. And we all wonder, what am I doing here? How am I going to manage? Okay? Rav Ashlag goes on to say, Ki yadua she'inyan Sukkah hu b'chinat seila d'meheimanuta. It's known that the issue of the Sukkah and the main aspect of the Sukkah is the Sechach, okay, which is the roof part, okay, has the aspect of Seila d'meheimanuta, the shade of faith. That's its name in the Zohar. The name of the Sukkah is the shade of faith. All right? Umitzad adin, from the aspect of the halacha, tzarich liot silta meruba mechamata. In the amount of shade in the sukkah needs to be more than the amount of sunlight. Now he's going to look at why in the inner, all right? V'zeh yadua shechamam ramezet lebchinat idiyah. We know that the sun, okay, is the hint of the means in the language of Kabbalah. It means the aspect of knowledge. It doesn't mean knowledge only in the sense of intellectual knowledge. It means actually receiving the light of God, actually receiving the experience of the light of God. Okay? ולבנה מרמזת לבחינת אמונה. Whereas the moon, which is the aspect of Israel, okay, is the aspect of faith. והוא דרך שאמרו חז"ל, and this is in the way that the sages have taught us, Yisrael monin lelevana, Israel counts by the moon. Okay, we count our calendar, our days, our weeks, our months by the moon. V'umot ha'olam, and the nations of the world by the sun. Okay? Now let's find out what Rav Gottlieb wants to tell us about what this means in our inner work. Now, when we're talking about Israel and we're talking about the other nations, it doesn't mean Jews and non-Jews. It actually means the different aspects of ourselves. Because the Zohar teaches us that a human being is a world on his own, or of his own. Each human being is an individual world, and everything that we see outside is simply an outer representation of what we have inside. Okay? So the nations of the world in the human being are the wills to receive in the human being. And the will to receive in the human being likes revelation. Okay? Like we said earlier, the will to receive has a very big component in spirituality. It wants to receive spirituality. All right? So it likes the revelation of God, the light of God. It wants to feel it. It wants to experience it. Okay? And this is hinted at by the sunlight. Why does it want it? Because in the revelation of the light of God of any type, there is pleasure. Whereas the Israel side of the human being, and each one of us has that Israel side, we have the soul within us, which is the aspect of the will to give unconditionally. Monin lelevana goes by the moon. What does that mean? It means that all our values of our service for God and our life force are measured by the faith that we have, which is of a different paradigm than that of knowledge. It's a different paradigm of consciousness. Faith is an aspect of a way of giving unconditionally, and therefore is considered closer to God than that of knowledge. Okay? And this is called faith above knowledge because it's a higher level of consciousness than that of knowledge. All right? So, call out if there's any questions. Hainu, that is to say, שבכל פעם שרואים שיש בחינת חמה, ושהיא מרובה מאצילותה, so every time we see, not only in the Succah, in the physical Succah, but in our inner life, that we have an aspect of revelation which is more than the shade, that we have more sunlight than there is shade, so more revelation of the light of God than there is faith. As I צריכים לחסות יותר, we need to add more shade. Okay, we need to cover up the revelation so that the shade again will be greater. Okay? Because that's the rule, that we need that the shade, the faith, will be greater than the revelation. How are we meant to do that? How is that meant to work? Okay, let's see, we get the good feeling inside ourselves, we get a good feeling of understanding, of knowledge, of the light of God comes in, we feel wonderful, as we're meant to feel. We're meant to feel grateful and happy, okay? This is not something to be sad about, it's something to be happy about. It's a great experience, and it's something, it shows that we're on the right path. It's God confirming our work. It's an incredible, beautiful gift that God is giving us, okay? So how are we meant to add shade? All right? In what way? How should we do it? Okay? We don't want to spoil the beautiful joy that we're getting. That would be kind of like ungrateful. All right? So what does it mean to add shade at this point? Okay? This is what he writes. Peirush. Explanation. This is the way of those who are walking in the service of God. That we always need to walk in our faith and not rely on knowledge. Okay? Because if our faith is dependent, if our work of God is dependent on these experiences, okay, then it's not going to, first of all, it's using our wills to receive for ourselves alone. We're going to end up separated from God anyhow. And second of all, you can't rely on these experiences coming all the time, as we're going to find out, okay? Because receiving the experience as per se leads us into, it was my kochi va'otzim yadi, my power and the strength of my hand, because the will to receive for ourselves alone tends to grab it, okay? Okay, so the way of those who are walking in the service of God needs always to be the walking in faith and not relying on knowledge. And sometimes it happens that suddenly we have that beautiful experience of the light of God coming within us. We feel good, we feel connected, we feel a good taste in our work, we feel that God loves us, we feel we understand what we're doing. This can come because of our consequence of our own work. Sometimes he merits to an understanding and good feeling in his work. And sometimes it comes just as a gift from heaven, okay? A sort of enlightenment, okay, which gives him this beautiful good feeling in his service of God. So what is Rabbi Ashlag teaching us here? He's saying, don't just sit back and enjoy, because if we do, we're going to grab it for ourselves alone, because that's our nature, all right? So then a person needs to act on himself, to cover it up, to build a succah, all right, to build a succah within himself, where the shade is more than the sunlight, okay? How does he do that? To use the light, not in order to just enjoy it, but to awaken the left-hand line, all right? The left-hand line, as we said, was the side of Yitzchak, and to awaken the left-hand line, because one of the things we can use the left-hand line for is that we can see where we really are at in truth, okay? So one of the things that we started off by saying in this piece, that the Succah answers all our questions, even the worst of our questions, okay? And it's a great thing to have these questions, as we're going to find out. These questions are going to be the building blocks with which we're going to create our inner Succah, okay? So these questions are important. But the truth of the matter is that the vast majority of mankind are walking around, okay, feeling quite happy with themselves the way they are, all right? Completely oblivious that there's anything wrong with them in any way whatsoever, completely unconscious, and I'm talking about every sort of person, whether they're secular or whether they're religious, doesn't make any difference in this respect, okay, unfortunately, all right, we have that most people are quite unconscious, all right, so here he's saying, if you've been given the gift of the light, use it to find the truth, okay, the truth might be uncomfortable, it might be hard, but it's true. All right? And what do we find in the left-hand line? We find that we've got many questions, we've got many lacks, we've got many difficulties, we've got many complaints. All these questions that we talked about at the beginning of the article. We might feel bad, okay? So what happens when we discover all that within us? We need to use those questions to say, I need to have faith that everything that I'm discovering in me comes from God. And so therefore the discoveries within ourselves are actually discoveries of aspects which are given to me by God. And that takes a lot of faith, okay? Not to feel guilty, not to feel, obviously we have feelings of shame or whatever, but even the feelings of shame and even the feelings of guilt come from God, because he is the only actor in the universe. There isn't any other than him, and he is good and does good unconditionally, all right? So therefore, anything that I find myself within me, I need to use as a stepping stone, as a means, as my sort of prime material to come into the shade of faith. All right? All right. So again, we find at this point, when he discovers that within him, he needs to go back to faith. All right. I'm going back to the actual article. And if a person walks in the way of holiness, and he doesn't add extra shadow, extra work to find more faith, then from heaven they have mercy on him. Then they're going to cover up the sunlight for him anyhow. In other words, that in any case, that feeling of the revelation of the light of God will die in him anyhow. It doesn't last, okay? And not if he's kind of using it as a prop for all his work. Because as we said earlier, the will to receive oneself alone comes and grabs it. And then a person gets annoyed with God. Because a person understands the whole thing differently according to his intelligence. If he has the aspect of revelation of the light of God, then they want him to continue giving him more revelation of the light of God. Oh, well, that's not the way it works. Because my thoughts are not your thoughts. And so from Mishamayim, they add again more reasons for him to go back into the shadow. The shade has come, and therefore he needs faith again. Rav Ashlag writes here, Rav Gottlieb writes here, in every circumstance where a difficulty arises in the life of the human being, okay, this difficulty arises because the reality of God's goodness, that he is good and does good, is hidden from him. And it doesn't make any difference if this difficulty is physical or spiritual or emotional, all right? A person at this point needs to believe that, in other words, use the difficulty as the building blocks for belief, that this came about in order for him to grow more vessels for bringing new levels of faith in God into his reality. Okay? And if a person uses the shadow which is covering up his sun, is using the difficulties, the questions, whatever, in order to come to more faith, then they give him, as a consequence, a new level of revelation of the light of God. Okay? Why? Because he's created the vessel which is appropriate to receive that light of God. Okay, he's not receiving for himself alone at this point. He has corrected an aspect of the vessel for the sake of giving, and therefore he's in affinity of form, and therefore God can shine the light to him in a way which won't harm him. And when he receives that incredible light, which we said is joy, it's fantastic, it's beautiful, then again, a person needs again to add to a further level of faith. All right, not rely on that good feeling, but use that light to find more aspects of his life from which he can work on to bring more faith into his life, which is more difficulties he finds, more questions he finds. Use the light to go deeper. Because like I say, finding the questions and the difficulties in our life isn't easy. All right, we can have a difficult relationship with somebody for many, many years, for example, and yet we don't know how to solve it. We blame the other guy. We say the other one's no good. Okay? We have no idea at all where our part to play is operating. Okay? What we do is we project onto the other one. And it can happen in families that things go on for decades. All right? Because we are not using the light, using that revelation of the light to actually find out the truth about ourselves. Because without the truth about ourselves, we can't pray about it. We don't know what we have to correct. We don't know where we're going, and we can't use it as a means of actually finding more faith. So the light here is so precious. All right? So a person needs to feel joy, not from the perspective of, okay, now I can just chuck faith and, just relax, okay? Oh no, on the contrary, he can use the aspect of the revelation of the light of God that's come into his life, all right, in order, first of all, as a confirmation that he's on the right direction, and to use it to actually discover something about himself that he can't see otherwise, all right? If we don't see where we're going wrong, we can't correct it, all right? And he goes on to say, if we ourselves don't add, then from God, they'll add to him another aspect of shade, of hester panim, of God hiding his face, and so on and so forth. So either we do it, or God does it for us, and eventually, with this cycle going round and round and round and round, we eventually get to merit dveikut for eternity. However, it's not an easy process. Rav Ashlag says, but we need to make a really, 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 really hard effort to receive the shadow, to receive the hester panim, to receive the fact that God's covering up his light, to find those dark places within us, and to say that it is a holy shadow. Okay? In other words, when we find those dark places within us, to say that this is holy, that all this shadow, all this covering up of the light, all the hard questions we find within us come from God. They don't come from the other side. They come from God, because it is only God who has the power. And the Sitra Achra is only an expression of one aspect, which is our will to receive for ourselves alone. But when we discover these aspects within us, we need to say everything comes from God. Even the worst aspects of ourselves come from God. And that they were given to us in order that we would have a conscious place to take upon ourselves our faith. That even these worst aspects within us come from God, and we can use them to create faith. All right? Exactly what Yitzhak did. He transformed something which was barren, something which has got no life force, something which is hard, and connects it with faith. He's bringing the letter Aleph in. It can become a source of flowing water, flowing connection. And this is called the Tzela de Meheimanuta, the shade of faith. It's exactly what the Succah is. Okay, that's the name of the Succah in the Zohar. V'zeh kadosh, and this is holy. Now, derech hakatuv, in the way that the scripture says, Ki yesharim darkei Hashem, for straight are the ways of God. It's God who's given us everything that's inside of us. Okay? Tzadikim yelchu bam, the righteous will walk in them. Uposhim yikashlu bam, and the wicked will stumble in them. Let's look at Rabbi Gottlieb here. That is, that if a person believes that all the aspects of the lowliness which is within him actually came from God and came for his welfare, for his benefit, in order that he will have a place to receive the yoke of the kingdom of heaven from the place of faith, az yelchu bam, then we'll go forwards, we'll progress, we'll be able to move on in our lives, we'll be able to progress in our lives. Like I said earlier, if we don't do it, if we don't do the work of discovering what there is, then we'll just play the broken record round and round again. Okay? In our relationships, in our lives, we'll get stuck. Okay? So the righteous, that is one who uses the light of this period, of this time of year, of the revelation of the light of God, not in order to receive it, but in order to enhance his faith, then he moves forwards. But if he thinks that all this lowliness that he discovers within himself comes from his own self, okay, from his own Yetzer Hara, and this reality of the lowliness that he sees within himself testifies that he doesn't belong to the service of God, or the service of God doesn't belong to him or to her, then how's he going to manage the work of God if he thinks it's got no connection with it, if he gets all depressed? Okay, and if he thinks it comes from him himself, then yeah, it's the will to receive for himself alone. Like the will to receive for himself alone is not just grabbing onto the goodies, the revelation of the light of God from the positive. He's also grabbing on to the revelation from the light of God of seeing the darkness within ourselves. He's grabbing onto that as well. Okay? And saying, let's get you all depressed. Let's get you all miserable. Let's get you think it was you yourself, how lousy you are, or how terrible you are. Something like that. Okay? That's the will to receive for ourselves alone. Okay? Those sort of self-talk is the will to receive for ourselves alone. When a person discovers his own loneliness, what he has to say is, even my own loneliness comes from God. He gave it to me because he knows that with this loneliness, I will be able to build a structure of a Succah within myself. And we're going to go on to see in a moment how that works. All right. Okay. וזה עניין שעושים את הסכך מפסולת גורן ויקב. So, this is the issue of what we make the Sechach from. Now, it comes from a verse in Devarim, which, I'm sorry, I forgot to look it up earlier, but in which the festival of Succot is related to gathering in the corn and gathering in the wheat and gathering in the harvest of the wheat and of the grapes, okay? And from this, Rashi tells us that the Sechach is made up of the two elements of the waste products of the goren, which is the threshing floor, and the yakev, which is the winery, okay? That's the actual materials which we make the Sechach from, okay? Now I know in modern days, you know, you buy this bamboo stuff strung along, or you can take palm leaves, whatever. You know, there's a range of stuff that you can actually use in practice to do the, you know, make the Sechach. It's got to be from the, you know, stuff which is leaves or something like that, which is not connected to the ground, you know, plant material or old plant material of different types. But Rashi is very specific, and he says psolet goren v'yakev. That is the waste products of the threshing floor and the winery. Shepiresh Avir Mori Rabbi Zatzal, which my father of blessed memory, that's Rabbi Baruch Ashlag, explained. Goren, the threshing floor, Melashon ger anochi, the threshing floor from the language of I am a stranger, okay, in this work, okay? And Rav Gottlieb explains that as a person feels himself to be a complete stranger to the service of God. That he doesn't feel it belongs to him at all. And when they show this to him from heaven, okay, what does he see? He sees that he can't even move his hand except for his will to receive for himself alone. And that he's sunk in all the beastly appetites, okay, like anybody, like just somebody from the marketplace. So what does the light show him, okay, which is shining? It shows him that he's a ger, that he's that he sees that he's not really doing the work at all, okay, all right. And what's yakev? Yakev is the winery, and it even goes further, and he says it's from the language of nokev shem Hashem, one who curses God. All right. Now that's from Leviticus. It's from Vayikra, and it says one who curses God. Okay. And that's what he sees within himself. All right, that he's not able to receive the divine providence, and the issue of the cursing doesn't actually mean that he speaks curses, but it means that he feels angry with God. He's got a bad feeling. He feels angry. He feels disappointed in the way God is behaving with him. He feels sad about it. That's designated as a curse. Okay. So what does we say? From this we make the Sechach. This is what Rashi tells us. It's from these feelings we make the Sechach. Okay? And the answer is yes. Alright? Lefaresh divrei kodsho, to understand the words of the Baal Sulam, he says the issue of the Sechach, which is the main aspect of the Sukkah, is to use these very negative feelings, these very negative states, to actually create our shade of faith, to create the Sukkah, to use these negative aspects, the worst we can think of, okay, to come to faith above knowledge, to come to faith, which is an aspect of paradigm, a different paradigm of consciousness completely. Okay, not our wills to receive, but the will to give, which is a complete opposite of knowledge. It's this desire for knowledge, it's the desire for experience, which brings us into this wasteland, this feelings of wasteland, of lowliness, okay, which is from the ger, that we are a stranger to the service of God, and that we are angry with God, and we curse the name of God, okay, because it's from our knowledge, from our will to receive, okay, it's what we see with our physical eyes, all right, that we feel disappointed, we feel we can't do things, we feel lowly, all right, that's the consciousness of the waste product, okay, of the goen, of the threshing floor and the winery, okay, that we are a ger, that we are a stranger to the service of God, that we don't trust God's providence. But if we remember that all this comes from God and it comes for our benefit, we can take those feelings and use them as the means to make the Succah, our inner Succah, which is this faith within it. And the answer really is, why this? Why this way? And the answer is, what are we going? If we don't see this stuff within us, okay, on what basis are we going to have faith? If everything's going hunky-dory in our lives, if everything's going really well in our lives and everything feels just fine, just the way we are, and we're completely oblivious anyhow, and we're just chugging along thinking everything's fine, okay, we don't need any faith. We just think everything's fine. What do we need faith for? We need faith when things are hard. Yeah? This is the building blocks to actually give us that connection with God, which comes through giving, which comes through faith. So in fact, when we discover the Goen and the Yaakov, the Ger, the stranger, that we're strangers to the service of God, and that's the reality, and that's the truth, okay, for all of us, all right? That's the reality. Of course, it can express itself differently in different people. The expression can be different, but that's the reality for all of us, all right? And that all of us feel feelings of disappointment or anger or misery or whatever, okay, with the way God conducts ourselves or our families or the world, okay, or the community, all right? When we can all of us see that, then we can say, but I have to believe that it's for my benefit, and we have to believe that everything that happens is for our benefit, and that God is good and does good. And of course it's very difficult to do. It's very, very difficult to do. All right? But this is the raw material. This is our primal material. This is our raw material from which we can really build faith from. Okay? Build our inner Succah. All right? Remember Yitzhak, how he transformed the bore, the lowliest pit, okay, into a be'er, into a force for bringing life. Because faith brings life. Okay? All right? So then, if a person can take this and make a shade, but give faith and sit under it, all right? In other words, he's sitting under all these lowliest things, the worst things, and fulfills through this waste products he finds within himself the mitzvah of Succah, the actual aspect of the Succah. Okay? Explanation, Rabbi Gottlieb. שרק בזמן שמתגלה הפסולת הנ"ל באדם, it's only when this waste product is manifest in the human being, אז שייך שקיים מצוות אמונה למעלה מהדעת. Then that's when we can fulfill the mitzvah of faith above knowledge. Because like I say, if we feel we're fine, there's no place to go with that. It's when we feel the negative stuff and we're honest about it, then there's a place to work. ונמצא שמצוות סוכה שייכת אך ורק אצל מי שיש לו פסולת. And thus we find that on the inner, the mitzvah of the sukkah belongs only to somebody who feels he's got these waste products within him. אבל מי שאינו מרגיש פסולת בעצמו, but one who feels he's perfectly fine, אין שייכת לו מצוות סוכה. The mitzvah of sukkah doesn't apply. Okay? There's nothing to do. So actually finding the stuff within us is already a Yeshua. ויקר שיש לאדם שמחה ממצווה זו. And the most important thing is a person needs to feel great joy from this mitzvah. That is to say, הנו ששמח בכל הפסולת שנמצאת בו. He's happy about everything he finds within him. Alright, so he finds that he's lazy, he finds that he's angry, he finds that he's weak, he finds that whatever he finds, okay? We've all got our own expression of it, okay? Particular to us, alright? But it is good to find כי דווקא על ידה יכול לקיים מצוות האמונה. Because through this he's able to fulfill the mitzvah of emunah, and by fulfilling the mitzvah of emunah, then God is able to give him a new revelation, a new connection with the light of God, is what we saw earlier. Okay? By fulfilling that mitzvah of emunah, he actually becomes closer to God, he's correcting some of those vessels, and therefore the light of God is able to come to him again. All right? And the most important thing, therefore, is that he feels joy from this mitzvah. כי אמונה למעלה מהדעת נקראת שמחה של מצווה. For faith above knowledge is called the joy of the mitzvah. And this is one of the reasons why we decorate the Sukkah. Okay? We decorate the Sechach. We hang pomegranates, we hang decorations, we decorate it because of the joy that we're finding a way to have faith in God. It's a big thing. נמצא שכל הקושיות והשאלות שישנן במציאות בעולם נתקנות בסוכה. And this is where we started off one. We find that all our difficulties, all our questions about who we are, why we're here, what we're doing, all our hardships, all our problems, okay, that there is in reality in the world, are corrected in the Sukkah. Because without these questions, without these difficulties, without these problems within us, we can't make the Sechach. Just it's dafka from those thoughts and from those opinions that bring to a person this waste within us, were called goin vayekev, which are called the goin and yekev, the fact that we are strangers to the work of God, that we curse the name of God. It's from this we can make our inner Sechach, hanikra bechinat emunah, which is called the aspect of faith. מה שאין כן, אם לא היה לו את הפסולת, לא היה באפשרותו לעשות סכך. And it says, if we don't have that psolet, I'd say rather if we don't have awareness of that psolet, if we don't have awareness of that waste product, we can't make the sechach. Okay?
So we're talking about the skak, that's the roof of the sukkah, right?
That's right.
And that's
But
supposed to represent like our negativity?
well, it's not the negativity. Yes, it's made up of our negativity, which we transform into faith. Yes.
Oh, I've never heard of it that. And so why do we only why is it not solid and it has to like have an opening to the sky?
Well, it we have more shade than sunlight. Okay.
Right.
All right. That means we need to have more faith than revelation of the light of God. Okay.
Well, that's the reality. Well, I can't say that's not really the reality, but God is God is revealing all the time, but we don't necessarily see it, or uh, it's not obvious. It's revealed in in creation.
Well, when we're talking about revelation of the light of God, I think it's much more, it's how we experience the light of God within us. So that we need to
Oh,
go into the place of faith rather than the